Hello and welcome to Resilient Agenda Radio, the mental fitness podcast. I'm your host, Hadley Fisher. Here at Resilient Agenda, we bring you insights, stories and wisdom from across the world for how you can improve and protect your mental fitness in this busy and uncertain time. Today I'm joined by Andrea Niles. Andrea is a scientist, an entrepreneur, the founder of women's health platform Prospera, and a proud mum. And today we're talking maternal mental health, and in particular, how expecting and new parents can prepare for and cope better with the challenges of parenthood. And I'm really excited myself to learn a lot here today. Andrea joins us from San Francisco. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
Tell us more about who you are, your academic background, and how you ended up in the field of maternal health and running this company, which we're going to talk about in a while, supporting women going through maternal health challenges.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a scientist by training, and I was sort of in the world of academia, doing research studies, writing research papers on treatments for anxiety and depression in women's health. And I was doing that for a while and really felt like I wanted to bring the work that I was doing out more into the real world to get people access to treatments that are very effective for these disorders. And so I decided to go more into the world of industry and, figuring out how we can get these things into the hands of the people who need them. And somewhere in there, I had my own children. I have two children, and I had my own challenges. I think motherhood is the most difficult thing that I have done, and done a lot of difficult things in my career. But motherhood is the hardest, and I had my own mental health challenges, and I struggled to get the help that I knew everything about. I know everything about, how what kind of help is going to be effective, and I struggled myself to get it. And so that really inspired me to create Prospera with the mission to remove all barriers for moms accessing really high quality mental health support.
Wonderful. So many of our listeners are women, but we also have plenty of men too, and I don't consider this my wheelhouse. In a stigmatized field, I guess maternal mental health can be a little overlooked in some ways as well. What are the basics of perinatal, postnatal health? Talk us through these terms. What is it? What does it do to you? Why does it happen? How common is it? And how is it different to your garden variety, standard depression, anxiety that a lot of people may be familiar with?
Yeah, so perinatal is kind of a technical term, but it really just means surrounding pregnancy. So during pregnancy and postpartum, and so mental health conditions are particularly common during this period of a woman's life. So it's a period of increased risk. So there are different kinds of challenges that come up, but in postpartum we see some other kinds of things like anger and rage. A lot of women unfortunately experience traumatic births, and so the sort of residual impacts of that. And something called intrusive thoughts, incredibly common and distressing to moms. And I liken the postpartum period to moving from sunny Southern California to the North Pole, where your entire life is changed. And there's barely any daylight, and it's freezing cold, and there's snow everywhere. And how do you cope with this entirely new environment? And it's incredibly challenging. And so it's definitely a time when you need to have emotional and mental fitness to be able to handle those challenges that come up. And yeah, have the tools in place to be able to cope with it.
And how common is it?
Yeah, I was just working on a paper related to this. So as many as 20% of women will experience some kind of mood or anxiety disorder during pregnancy and postpartum. And in BIPOC women, it can be even higher, as estimates as high as almost 60% of women experiencing these kinds of conditions.
Okay. You started Prospera to help women deal with the challenges of pregnancy. what were some of the conversations you were having that made you realize that this was a problem? What were the women saying to you that wasn't being well addressed, or that you thought was being missed by um, mainstream treatments?
Yeah, so at this point I've talked to over 500 women who are either pregnant or postpartum, and I hear, although there's lots of different kinds of stories, just a lot of similar themes of, I didn't realize that it was going to be this difficult, and this, a lot of anxiety about the well-being of the baby. Am I doing things right? Um, Feeling, just completely overwhelmed, having doubts about one's ability to be a good mom, and support their child in the way that they feel like is best for them. um, and then the other piece is just not feeling like the support is available for mom. So it's just really hard for moms to access mental health support. Medications are pretty easy to come by, and that's kind of the most common thing that moms get, but they often don't want to take medications. And so just sort of accessing a provider who understands motherhood, who has that expertise, who's got availability and who's affordable, is just incredibly difficult for women, at least in the United States.
Okay. So, what are the signs that someone might be struggling from this, or the symptoms for new or expecting mums who might be listening that they may be facing? What are normal emotions from a big change, and when is a diagnosis helpful, and how can people prepare for that, whether they're having kids themselves or supporting someone, or have friends or children in this situation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it's not always easy to know when is this just normal and when is this something that I should get some help for. I would say probably the two biggest things I would pay attention to is how long has that been going on. So whether you're feeling down or depressed or tearful, struggling to get out of bed, low motivation, or a ton of anxiety, having trouble sort of going out or leaving the house or doing certain things with your child that you want to do because you're so anxious or fearful. So if that's lasted for at least a couple of weeks, then that starts to suggest that something might be, it might be beneficial to get some additional support. And the other criteria that I would have people think about is this getting in the way of my ability to function? Am I able to take care of my baby? Am I able to take care of myself? Are you showering? Are you eating? Are you taking time for yourself? Or are you able to do things? People inviting you to things. Can you go to that? Can you function in your life? And if it's getting in the way of that, then that's another sign that it might be good to get some support.
Yeah, I find that is probably the most important thing to know about any mental illness. Really, people often ask me, "Hey, I feel anxious. How bad can this anxiety disorder thing really be?" Or I get sad sometimes. How bad can depression be? When we do our workshops and our courses, and I say, well, it gets in the way of functioning. And of course, there's a whole lot of diagnostic criteria that psychologists
Mhm.
use, but, social relationships, going to work, focusing and concentrating, getting out of bed, kind of like it when you see it. Um, then it may not even be, it may not be a problem, but it's worth investigating. And I think um, just that mindset of don't wait until you're deep, deep, deep in the ditch to start doing something about it, whether it's something you can do yourself or getting help. I think that's so important to know and to realize. You mentioned social support before, and that's important for all kind of mental health challenges, and I imagine that's the case here too. How does that help? Let's say you're coming through pregnancy or you've got a diagnosis. How does social support help someone experiencing um, these maternal health challenges?
Yeah, so I think having help is particularly important in motherhood. And I was actually just telling somebody this, I think it was yesterday. I said it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And so, you cannot be afraid to ask for help and reach out for support from the people around you. I think a lot of moms feel like they have to do it themselves, or if they need help, somehow they're weak, or they're, not good enough, not a good enough mom. But I think when it comes to parenting, I think people should reach out for as much help and support as others are willing to give, because it's just so critical to be able to take care of yourself, to have that help and have other people to watch the baby while you can go do things to make sure that you're okay. Um, and we know just generally from depression and treatments for depression that social interaction is a very powerful way to push back against depression, to lift mood, that social support and social relationships are really critical for mental well-being just across the board.
Yeah. Now, I imagine for a lot of new parents going outside, even maybe it's cold, that can be a challenge. I imagine a practical way to do that is just, well, bring people over or something, just get people around you in your environment, because a lot of our friends who have had children, they do find it hard to go out early on. You mentioned expectations before. On your website, you've got this lovely line. I can't remember it exactly, but motherhood is not all flowers and snuggles. We congratulate people on having a child, and then you're supposed to have this perfect experience of bringing a new life into the world where nothing goes wrong. And if you're not super duper happy about it, what's wrong with you? Can you talk us about these expectations that women have of themselves and that others have of pregnant women? And is there anything we can say or do or think that can just help us be more realistic as we approach this time of life?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably like any challenge that a woman faces or people face, we want to be successful at it. And so I think we sort of go into motherhood sort of envisioning how we want to be as a mom, and what it's going to be like, and we hear how hard it is, and so, okay, this is how I'm going to deal with that, and it's not going to be that hard for me because I have, all of these strengths, or whatever. I mean, I think we sort of want to go in believing that it won't be too hard. And so I think that can be a challenge when women sort of are in it and really realizing that, wow, there's a lot of parts of this that are really, really hard, and not the way that I thought it was going to be. And the other piece of that is that I have heard just so many wildly different experiences that moms have. So just because your friend had a certain kind of experience, that absolutely does not mean that that's how it's going to look for you. So many differences in the baby, in people's sort of biology and physical self, and how labor and delivery goes, that all of those variables can make it really drastically different. So it's hard to know, um, you know, how it's going to be for you because you just can't anticipate. Um, and so, one thing that I would like, we're talking about, when do you seek help? When do you know it's time to seek help? Well, I actually believe that every mother should have access to mental health support through that transition, like regardless of whether they have a problem or not. Because I think that you need that support. And so, you're talking about expectations and things being different than how you expect. If women had that support, I think it would mitigate a lot of the problems that do come up, and the feelings of not being adequate, and sort of not realizing how hard it was going to be, because you already have in place that support available for you.
Yeah, I agree. And, we do a lot of manager training for people at work to understand employee mental health. And one of the things that we say is you cannot control how, your employees might come to you or what have you, but you can control how open you are and how available you are around mental health. And what we often hear is that just giving people the option of support, even if they don't actually take it up, can actually give them, a small degree of control over their situation. That feeling that comes in depression, which is, I'm alone, I've got no one. If you can, provide evidence to someone, well, that's not the case. Here is an option, even if you don't want to take it, or if you've got a better option. I've heard stories like that being really powerful.
Yeah, that kind of safety net that is there just in case you need it.
Yeah. Some of us have heard of postnatal depression, but I've heard you say that the number one concern mothers come to you with is postpartum anxiety. We don't hear much about postpartum anxiety. What is it? Is it a diagnosis? And how does it differ to everyday normal anxious feelings? And what is it about this particular um, aspect of maternal health that's overlooked?
Yeah, so postpartum depression is a little bit simpler in a sense because there's just this sort of diagnosis of depression. Whereas anxiety, there's actually different types of anxiety disorders. And so there's a little bit more complexity to anxiety. So you can have anxiety in social situations, you can have panic attacks, you can have obsessions and compulsions. And so anxiety can kind of, the type of anxiety sort of matters when it comes to diagnosis of anxiety. Um, and so in postpartum, I think anxiety is particularly common just because suddenly you are, wholly responsible for the health and well being of this tiny, helpless baby that can't do anything for itself. So it feels like a lot of pressure and like the stakes are high. And so I think there's definitely a degree of anxiety that is reasonable and expected. But again, when moms say, this is interfering with my ability to enjoy my baby, I can't be present with my child, I can't do the things I want to do, I'm consumed by this anxiety day in and day out, I can't sleep, those kinds of things that really like interfere in your life and your functioning is when the anxiety is probably more than it needs to be. And why it's overlooked, I'm not sure. I feel like maybe there was a public health campaign around postpartum depression in particular that was very effective. Lots of messaging about that, but they kept it focused on depression and sort of neglected the other conditions. So there's sort of a gap in knowledge about the other things that can come up.
Speaking of a gap in knowledge, can we get a soundbite from you around male postnatal depression? Because we have a lot of male listeners. They're probably flicking through the podcast, wondering why should I listen to this episode about maternal health and pregnancy? That's got nothing to do with me. And maybe my wife's been pregnant, but that's all done and dusted. But let's say you're about to have a child. Why should men care about male postnatal depression? And what is it? How does it work? And what can we do about it? How can we notice it?
Yeah. Men are such a critical part of this discussion. And so I talk to women a lot, but I would say their partners come up constantly in this discussion. And so there's one piece of this, which is that, men, going into fatherhood are also moving to the North Pole, right? So their entire environment is changing, and they don't have the hormonal piece, but there isn't strong evidence that hormones are the cause of postpartum depression anyway. So I think that the biggest factor is just this change in one's environment, changing, sleep patterns, sort of changing your freedom and ability to do the things that you did before you had a baby. And so I think that transition can be also very challenging for men. We actually have had a couple men on our platform who we've supported with our tools. And one thing that's common is sort of feeling like they don't know how to bond effectively with the baby, or not feeling that bond, and feeling like their wife is sort of has the bulk of the responsibility when it comes to breastfeeding, and sort of feeling almost left out in a sense. So I think that's something that we hear. And then I think also men play a critical role in sort of supporting their partners. And so I think men can help their partners by really offering as much help as they possibly can, trying to be involved as much as they can to be able to support their partners effectively. And I think when both, mom and dad, or both partners, are really doing a lot of effort to take care of this baby and sort of engage in this new role, that can help, both parents in terms of their mental health.
Do you think the social context matters? I live in Europe, in Northern Europe, for example. Men and women, have you could say a more generous social safety net. That's often criticized in America. It's more normal for large employers to allow males to spend more time at home during this early period. Do you think there's something to be said for the American context around get back to work, or this is your wife's job? Do you think that do you come across that at all? And has your experience gone beyond America in terms of comparing how different countries handle this?
Yeah, I absolutely think that the context in America is not helpful to moms. So with limited leave from work, very minimal or no help from the government in terms of supporting childcare costs, those things have massive impacts on mental health and well-being of moms. The science shows it, so there's no question that having government policies in place that support work leave and childcare could be really effective for helping reduce these symptoms. But that said, I think perinatal mental health conditions are a worldwide phenomenon. So I think they are not only something that's experienced in the United States.
Can I quote you something from LinkedIn that you wrote? I hear over and over again from mums interested in my company Prospera that they went to therapy and just talked. They never got anything actionable that they could do to reduce their anxiety or manage their depression. I'll be blunt. This is negligence. There is no excuse for not providing clients with tools to improve their mental health, for just coming into your session and letting the question, "How was your week?" guide the discussion. I couldn't have said it better myself, Andrea. That's why we do mental fitness, and I think it's why therapy in some ways is stigmatized too. The lying on the couch, tell me about your childhood. Therapy is expensive. There are access issues to it. You don't just go once to get a good result. You might need to go 8 or 12 or 20 times. That's a couple of grand, which is a lot of money for especially lower income people. So they're not going to do it. But the tools of CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, which, as many people would know, is probably the leading treatment, even more so than medications at times for some conditions, is really helpful. So why was it time for a new approach? Was that the access issue that you found? Was it that experience of therapy? Had you gone through it yourself? What was it that made you write that online? Because that really spoke to me.
Yeah, this is probably my most familiar soapbox, I would say, and really just it stems from my training, the training that I had at UCLA, and I worked there with Michelle Krask, who's a world-renowned expert on treatments for anxiety and depression, and was trained in um, the scientific models that underlie mental health issues, and anxiety and depression. And you need to start from the science, and then you need to provide interventions that are going to change brain chemistry and change neural pathways, that are going to help people reduce their symptoms and ultimately live better lives. And talking is great. It's really helpful to talk about what's going on. We've known that forever, but we know a lot more than that about how the brain works and how we can actually change neurobiology to help people reduce these symptoms and feel better. And so we need to do more than that, as mental health professionals. And so that's why we at Prospera, we support people talking about their problems. And on top of that, we are really encouraging engagement with digital tools, goal setting, this is what we want to see you working on this week because this is related to this goal. And then if they, and then we're checking in over the next week, how did that go? Did you do this thing we talked about? If not, why not? What got in the way? Let's troubleshoot. So we're really trying to get people more towards their goals that they want to achieve and the life that they want to live, with actual strategies and suggestions.
I love that. So for those people who are listening to this, we do pretty much the same thing, but with analog tools. We had the idea to put positive psychology and CBT and behavioral science tools into a paper planner, something that people still use despite the digital world. And yeah, just, like the thing that comes to mind is they don't teach you this stuff in school. Some fortunate people learn this from their employers, if they've got an employer that supports mental health programs, but often we don't learn it. Now, we're talking about the tools that people need, and at Resilience Agenda, we define fitness as being capable or equipped in advance with for a future challenge. It might be running a marathon, it might be just doing life, or it might be preparing for pregnancy with a mindset, the process, and the skills for maintaining our mental health. Now, I don't mean for this, we don't mean for this concept to be troubling or triggering to people. Like, it's not about running marathons while you're 8 months pregnant, but what can women do leading up to pregnancy to get prepared, for want of a better term, pregnancy fit from a mental health perspective? It's got nothing to do with body image. It's about being mentally prepared. And of course, postpartum depression is not about, blaming anyone, but what can you do to minimize your risks, to give yourself the best chance? Because, what I find with most people is most people are just under-equipped with knowledge about this area, and they're under-equipped with skills, cognitive skills particularly, when life throws them a curveball. So how can women prepare?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think something like Resilience Agenda is uh, a great option for somebody, to say, let me do some work on myself to prepare for this period that I know is going to be challenging. And let me, practice some of these skills that will help sort of prevent me from struggling. And data has shown that prevention in pregnancy, doing preventative efforts using CBT concepts can prevent the onset of anxiety and depression postpartum. So there's really good data to support that is something that's perfectly worthwhile for women who are doing fine and not struggling with symptoms. And we do have sometimes moms who come to us, or women who come to us in pregnancy, who say, I want to start now to make sure I have something in place for that postpartum period. And so that's common for women who might have a history of mental health challenges, anxiety and depression, or women who struggled the first time around, and are trying to prevent that from happening this time. So women who are at elevated risk. And I think that's so amazing that they're sort of looking at their own kind of history and saying, I'm going to try to be prepared for this. And so for someone in that boat, I think doing something like Prospera, where you're actually working specifically with someone who can support you and guide you in practicing the tools, that's kind of one level up from a sort of self-guided, skills practice. I think both of those are great options to be able to be prepared.
Okay. What are some of these tools that you might learn about in a Prospera coaching course? So just for people who aren't aware, Prospera is a coaching platform that connects expecting and new mothers with coaches who have some training in the tools of mental health and how to support people. What are the tools, or the basic tools that they share, and how does it develop and progress over time? So let's say in your first session or two, what would you learn, and how does that progress over time to more advanced tools?
Great question. So Prospera is really based on cognitive behavioral therapy, which we've talked about. And the two main targets in cognitive behavioral therapy are thoughts and behaviors. And so in Prospera, we start by learning tools around thinking patterns, looking for traps in how we think about things, and then from there, learning ways to reframe your thinking and practice sort of evaluating situations in a way that's going to help you reduce negative emotions. So being able to think about something different so that you're think about something in a different way so that you're not feeling so incredibly anxious about it. And so we start with those what are called cognitive tools or thinking related tools, and then from there we go to behavior related tools. We look at, again, behavior patterns, things that you might be doing that contribute to feelings of depression or anxiety, whether that's avoiding things that make you feel anxious, not getting out of bed, or not taking care of yourself, not showering, not eating well, not getting outside. And then we try to encourage you to start making changes to those behavior patterns in a way that helps you kind of tackle the challenges that you're having, because we know that behavior is also very strongly tied to how we feel. So those are the two main targets. And then we have other tools that are a little bit different, but really, really well accepted by moms. We have an assertiveness tool that helps you assert your needs. Moms often use that with their partners, but you can use it with family members. We have tools for anger, identifying triggers for feelings of anger and rage, and how to cool that rage in that moment, practicing different ways of responding to anger, so you don't feel so overwhelmed by it. So those are some of the basic tools that we give to everybody.
That sounds fantastic. So, how did your research and your experience as a mum and a friend and a therapist supporting others go from a problem or a pain point to a business? Can you just talk us through that journey of, hey, I'm going to go from academia into the tech world of San Francisco? Talk us through that journey for you and how an idea became a business. This might be a bit more meta, pardon the pun, around, following a dream. But how did that unfold?
Yeah. So in academia, the main measure of my success was publishing a lot of papers in scientific journals. And the people who read papers in scientific journals are other scientists. And so the work that I was doing just felt like I was sort of contributing to the scientific community. And that work was really stuck inside that community. And as a scientist, I would talk a lot about, well, we need to get these things out to people, and there's not enough access, and we need to do more. And so there's a lot of that sort of talk about we need to do more, and here's some ideas about how we can do more. But I wanted to take that next step of actually doing it, actually sort of facing that challenge head on, because talking about it isn't solving the problem. So I really wanted to sort of face a new set of challenges, which is how do you take CBT, which is very technical, and make it appealing to people? How do you market it? How do you describe it? How do you build an actual experience that is that people want, that they want to pay for? And that was like a whole new set of challenges that I was excited to tackle, because I think the reward is really getting this into the hands of people and really getting it out there, which academics have not done successfully.
Okay. And what have you seen as the impact? I know it's only been around for a little while, but what impact has the platform had, and what motivates you to keep going when it gets hard?
Yeah, this is the best part, and I'm actually still continue every day to be blown away by the comments that we get and the feedback that we get from moms. Our coaches are amazing. We hire incredible coaches. I wish I could have one of our coaches to talk to every week. And moms are saying like this doesn't exist anywhere. Every mom should have this. I tell all my friends about this. Um, there's just not enough support for moms, and they love that it's designed for moms and specific to moms. Many of our coaches are moms, so that sort of group of people who actually really understands motherhood. And then also I love when people are saying I'm using these tools and they're helping me feel better. It's not just I'm getting the support, but I'm actually getting things that are working, and I'm actually doing them, and I'm trying them, and they're helping me. We get a lot of feedback around the tools, which is really exciting. And so, yeah, when it's hard, I feel like, just thinking about these comments and reading them and saying this has to exist. We have to figure out how to make this exist on a broad scale, because it really needs to be in the world.
Other than positive qualitative data, I guess you'd call that, how do you measure that it's working in ways that might be scientifically valid for you, or that investors might care about?
Yeah, so we know from scientific research that actually measuring outcomes, measuring symptoms over time, improves the effectiveness of a treatment. So we incorporate symptom measurement into the platform, not just for our purposes, but because it helps our coaches do a better job. It helps our clients get where they want to be. And so that's just a basic part of our platform. So we're collecting those data, and then we analyze them. I've presented them at conferences so we can look at reductions in symptoms of anxiety and symptoms of depression. Um, and then we also collect feedback on our coaches and sort of ratings for how our coaches are doing, how people feel like this compares to other experiences they've had, things like that, to get a sense of whether this is really sort of meeting the needs from the client's perception of their experience with the platform.
Okay. Have you faced challenges as a woman, as a mum, in the tech field or in the finance field, trying to get a female product, female tech product in inverted commas, out there? Is that something that you've faced challenges with, or have you been surprised or supported in a way that other women claim they haven't been supported when founding businesses?
Yeah, so the statistics in the venture capital world for female founders are sobering. About 2% of VC funding goes to women, and so it's hard to know, if your gender is impacting whether you've been successful or not, because raising venture capital is hard for everybody. So you never really know, but it has to be a factor, given that so few female founders are supported by venture capital. We did attempt to raise money about a year ago. It was also really not a good time because one of the big banks that supports founders and venture capitalists failed at that same time. The Silicon Valley Bank failed when I was raising. It was a very difficult time. So I wasn't successful, but we were able to continue with, the seed money that we had at that time, and we've continued going forward without that venture capital backing. And I will say, one of the reasons that I founded a company was because I really felt, and I have heard this from many other women in this field, that it's really hard to get your voice heard, um, when you're not the one making the decisions, and so that can be very frustrating, especially when you have so much expertise and you don't feel like that's being respected or listened to. And so I found it easier to just be the one who makes who makes the decisions than to try to convince other people that my opinion is valid, especially when that the whole team of people at the top is men. So but it's hard to know. It's hard to know to what extent it's playing a part.
Yeah. This might be, an unfair question to ask just because you're a woman here, but this is what part of what feeds into this. How do you balance being a mum, coping with these challenges that we've been talking about today, who understands presumably the importance of your own personal well-being more than most, and doing the right thing by your business venture? Can mums and can women have it all? And if so, how? What tips and tools would you have for career women, or for women with a side hustle, or women who are just going 100% on into the deep end, trying to start a business? What's your advice?
This is a complex question that I don't know that I can do service to in a minute response, but um, I think there are some absolute critical pieces, like having a supportive partner who does take on a lot of the work and the labor and is open to the idea of really splitting things. I think without that, it would be very, very difficult for me to be able to do all the different things that I'm doing. Um, and I think also the number of children matters too. I think, as you get to more and more kids, it becomes, I think, can become really difficult to balance a demanding career alongside parenting. Having help from family, that's something that is really critical for me. Having my parents or my husband's parents to be able to help when we need. So those things may be sort of less controllable. But then I also do a lot of the things that I know are really exactly the mental fitness kinds of things that you talk about with your platform. So making sure that I'm continuously exercising and eating well, and I practice cognitive reframing anxious thoughts, and just making sure I'm doing all of those things that I know are really critical to maintain my mental wellness, and making sure to prioritize those things.
Have you got a number one, strategy or thing that you do that you think gives you outsized returns? What investment do you make in your own well-being that gives you outsized returns? It could be one of those things that you just mentioned, or it could be just a little tweak that you've made to your life around habits or what have you. Everyone's trying to improve, in the least amount of effort. What's the 80-20 rule?
For me, and
20%
this is
investment that
specific
gives
to
you
me,
80%
I think
return.
exercise is really um,
Yeah.
very important for my own mental health, and so I have figured out a way to make sure that I can do that, which is very early in the morning. I get up at 5:15, and I go to the gym, and I do that consistently, and I always leave the gym feeling just so
So,
great, and so I know
so
that's
before the chaos of the day
a
starts.
that's a kind of non-negotiable thing. When I'm not doing that, I notice it has a pretty big impact on my mental health.
There you go. That's such a great insight. Exercise, nutrition, sleep. I mean, I've been revisiting these foundations, these basics, and I keep learning more and more, even after years of reading about this stuff, just how important those are, particularly for our mental health and how we feel. Um, like they're vital. Obviously, sleep is one that is affected out of your control, but it just makes it so much more important, if you can, to pull the other levers, especially when one or two are outside of your control. And your eating habits might change when you're a new parent. Your sleep certainly will. Okay, what's left? Connection with others. Can I exercise? How am I thinking about this? So there are tools, just they're not all always equally accessible. Are there any final takeaways that you'd love our audience to know about Prospera? Where can we learn more about the platform and your work? And yeah, we'd love to support you. I presume it's available globally. We have a global audience.
It is. I think right now we have women in the U.S. and Canada, but we could certainly support women all over the world, assuming they can find a time that works in their time zone. So yeah, so we're available around the world. And yeah, the way to get started with Prospera is to just go to our website. It's prosperamhw.com. So it's Prospera Mental Health and Wellness. That's what that stands for. And from there, you just book a phone consult. So that's the gateway to sort of getting involved in the platform. We have availability. If you booked a consult today, you could see somebody tomorrow. So we really want to make sure to decrease that wait time to get started. Um, and the last thing that I would say that's related to that is, I think there should be a really low bar for moms to get mental health support. I think this time in particular, as I've said in many different ways, is a time when I think all women should have access to that support. So, if you're not feeling like yourself, if you're, wondering like, is this something I should get help for? Then I would say, try something, do something, because I think there's such a potential for it can get worse, or it can impact your family, your relationships, your child. And so I think it's really important to tackle things as soon as possible in this period of a mom's life, of a woman's life.
And breaking down barriers, reducing stigma, increasing access, increasing choice. I think that's all really important. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to supporting you and watching with progress of the business. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I'm certainly going to be talking about it with my friends, and hopefully we can send some people your way. We might even be able to talk about how we can support you through the business as well.
All right. Thank you so much. So great talking with you.
Thanks so much, Andrea. That's it for today's episode of Resilience Agenda Radio. We hope you found this conversation thoughtful and inspiring. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe or like our channel, leave us a review and share us with your friends. To learn more about mental fitness, jump onto our website at resilienceagenda.com to find more resources for building your mental fitness and join the mental fitness movement today.